And welcome. We are in Junior English, and we now turn to a fascinating text. I'm with you on page 261, 262 of your hymnal. This is the William Cullen Bryant offering, Thanatopsis. Thanatopsis. Now, this is one of the strangest titles to a poem you will ever read. So let's go ahead and get a few things out of the way right away. William Cullen Bryant is educated to study Greek language, Greek culture. And so he is going to name his poem Thanatopsis from a Greek word. I'm with you on page 262. Do you see under background, underneath the picture there, the poem's title comes from Greek, and it means a view or a meditation on death. Okay? A view or a meditation on death. Thanatopsis, view or meditation on death. In other words, Bryan is going to write a poem about dying. So let's just write that down. Okay? One of the things that makes this poem so popular is that Bryan knew he was working with a topic lots of people fear. As we, I believe, have said before in Junior English, the major difference between you and a fly is that you know about fly swatters. You might want to write that line down so that you can think a little bit about what that means. The biggest difference between you and a fly is that a fly doesn't know what a fly swatter is. We're speaking in metaphor, aren't we? In other words, you know something a fly doesn't know, namely, someday you're not going to be here anymore. Last time I checked, you didn't meet anybody 200 years old. Why is that? Because that's the nature of life. You live, but not for long. And what comes at the end of your life is, of course, what we call death. If we were to jump down to 3B for just a moment, one or two of you could easily answer this question. Does death, both those you love and your own, bother you? Does it trouble you? Some people say, dude, I ain't worried about death. Or as Woody Allen once said, I'm not scared of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Others of us will say, you know what, we've had enough death in our life when we were young that it kind of freaks us a little bit. And we kind of don't like talking about it at all. It's kind of a downer for us. It makes us sad. Bryan is going to write a poem where he's going to say, let me tell you why you should not fear death. I would write that down. Some of you will say after you've studied this poem that even though it has a really strange, funky title, it's actually one of the cooler poems that you've ever read. Because again, he's going to make the argument, there's no reason to be afraid of dying. Don't fear dying because it's totally natural. Notice the first line of the poem and then we'll read it. To him who in the love of nature, capital N, holds. See, this is going to be an important part of this poem. The celebration of life means the need for death. To have life, you have to have death. It's all a part of nature. We look at Ruthie's tree that I often reference out there in the courtyard, and that tree is living. But not forever, right? We know that sooner or later that tree's got to die. All living things must die. Sooner or later, that is the inevitability, and we have to accept that. For Bryan, he says, if we know this has to happen, if we know the people we love the most have to go bye-bye. The word picture that we've sometimes used has been from the very earliest of your life, you were being taught about dying and about death. You just didn't realize it. Remember when you went to the park and you wanted to swing on the swings longer? You didn't want to go to the van. And the people there said, no, we got to go. And you cried. You didn't want to go. Kicking and screaming, you went to the van. They were already teaching you about you can only stay at the park so long. And then you have to go. You don't get to swing at the park forever. You don't. You don't. Well, I want to stay at the park for... I don't want to die. Bryan goes, maybe that's because you haven't thought about death and what death means. Thanatopsis, a meditation or a thinking about dying. Now, I'm going to tell you in advance, this poem was one of the first poems that in Europe labeled an American poet as a legitimate poet. This poem is known when it was published to be a little bit difficult at first to read and understand. So I'm going to challenge you to read very, very closely. Don't just listen to this poem, read this poem. Sit up, get your pen or pencil lead and follow along, word by word. See if you can stay up with this poem. I'm going to challenge you as readers of this poem to see if you can get all the way to the end. Notice, it is a little bit longer poem. It's going to end on 264. It is 81 lines long. To that degree, it's a poetic essay of sorts. On death. On death. But instead of it being a downer poem, oh man, we all gotta, it is a poem that will challenge you to think about why death is something not to be feared at all. Let's take a look at it now. William Cullen Bryant, Thanatopsis. Here we go. Pay attention.
Thanatopsis by William Cullen Bryant. To him who in the love of nature holds communion with her visible forms, she speaks a various language. For his gayer hours she has a voice of gladness, and a smile and eloquence of beauty, and she glides into his darker musings with a mild and healing sympathy that steals away their sharpness ere he is aware. When thoughts of the last bitter hour come like a blight over thy spirit, and sad images of the stern agony and shroud and pall and breathless darkness and the narrow house make thee to shudder and grow sick at heart, go forth under the open sky and list to nature's teachings, while from all around, earth and her waters, and the depths of air, comes a still voice. Yet a few days, and thee the all-beholding sun shall see no more in all his course, nor yet in the cold ground where thy pale form was laid, with many tears, nor in the embrace of ocean shall exist thy image. Earth that nourished thee shall claim thy growth, to be resolved to earth again, and lost each human trace, surrendering up thine individual being, shalt thou go to mix forever with the elements, to be a brother to the insensible rock and to the sluggish clod, which the rude swain turns with his share and treads upon. The oak shall send his roots abroad and pierce thy mold. Yet not to thine eternal resting place shalt thou retire alone, nor couldst thou wish couch more magnificent. Thou shalt lie down with patriarchs of the infant world, with kings, the powerful of the earth, the wise, the good, fair forms and hoary seers of ages past, all in one mighty sepulchre. The hills rock-ribbed and ancient as the sun, the vales stretching in pensive quietness between, the venerable woods, rivers that move in majesty, and the complaining brooks that make the meadows green, and poured round all old ocean's gray and melancholy waste, are but the solemn decorations all of the great tomb of man. The golden sun, the planets, all the infinite host of heaven are shining on the sad abodes of death through the still lapse of ages. All that tread the globe are but a handful to the tribes that slumber in its bosom. Take the wings of morning, pierce the bark and wilderness, or lose thyself in the continuous woods where rolls the Oregon, and hears no sound, save his own dashings. Yet the dead are there, and millions in those solitudes, since first the flight of years began, have laid them down in their last sleep. The dead reign there alone. So shalt thou rest. And what if thou withdraw in silence from the living, and no friend take note of thy departure. All that breathe will share thy destiny. The gay will laugh when thou art gone. The solemn brood of care plod on, and each one as before will chase his favorite phantom. Yet all these shall leave their mirth and their employments, and shall come and make their bed with thee. As the long train of ages glide away, the sons of men, the youth in life's green spring, and he who goes in the full strength of years, matron and maid, the speechless babe, and the gray-headed man, shall one by one be gathered to thy side, by those who in their turn shall follow them. So live, that when thy summons comes to join the innumerable caravan which moves to that mysterious realm, where each shall take his chamber in the silent halls of death, thou go not like the quarry slave at night, scourged to his dungeon, but sustained and soothed by an unfaltering trust, approach thy grave like one who wraps the drapery of his couch about him and lies down to pleasant dreams.
Now let's take a look at this poem as an essay on death of 3 parts. So let's write it down at level 1. At level 1, we're going to say that Bryan is going to talk about dying in 3 parts. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. And if you'll notice, that works rather well because there are 3 stanzas to this poem. Did you see that? Starting with me on 262, notice you have your first stanza, which runs all the way to line 30. Right? So in level 1, right now do this with me, write down part 1 or stanza 1 of this poem is lines 1 through 30. Lines 1 through 30. Okay? Then lines 31, notice, will begin the second part, right? And that one will run all the way to line 73. Do you see it? Right? So that's the second part of the poem, to line 73, part 2. Then, finally, the third part is a very brief part at 73 and following, right, to finish at our line 81. So let's ask ourselves real quickly at level 1, what is it that he says about dying, about death? Notice that in the very first opening lines of the poem, he invites you to think about dying. To him who in the love of nature holds communion, you like to think about nature, with her visible forms, she speaks a various language. To people who are happy, nature can make us happy. But notice, to people who start thinking about nature, inevitably have to think about death. Death. So let's take a look at it. The way he says it is, when thoughts, I'm with you at line 9 and following, read it with me. When thoughts of the last bitter hour come like a blight over thy spirit, and sad images of the stern agony, and shroud, and pall, and breathless darkness, and the narrow house. Whoa, whoa, whoa! The narrow house? What is that all about? The narrow house. Now for some of us, this is kind of freaky. That you live in a lot of houses in your life, but the house you're going to live in the longest is the one they lay you in the ground. Narrow. Because it doesn't need to be very wide, because you won't be moving. Why? Because you'll be gone. You'll be dead. Dude, I don't want to think about that. That's kind of like depressing. I mean, really? Why would we even want to read a poem about that? That kind of freaks me out. They're going to put me in the ground with a bunch of dirt over me? Yeah, but you're going to be gone. In other words, if you live, you have to die. You have to. You don't have any choice on the matter. Now, Cullen Bryant, and now I'm working at 3A for yourself. Cullen Bryant at 3A. This is 3A. Bryant is working in an old tradition called the Socratic tradition, from the great Greek philosopher Socrates, who dies in 399 BCE from drinking poison because he's executed by the state. But Socrates is going to be a very famous Greek teacher who will for all time, through the great dialogues of Plato, 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 will make us think about dying as something to be celebrated, not to be feared. So right away, let's point out, Colin Bryan is playing a game that's very Socratic. Every time you drive by a cemetery and you see tombstones, you have to be reminded that you exist, but not for long. Bryant says anytime you spend any time with nature, you have to accept both sides of the coin. Life, but also non-life. Right? In the Taoist symbol of the yin-yang, of course, the light and the darkness, the living and the dying, both have to be there. Notice he says, to nature's teachings, I'm at line 15. To nature's teachings, listen to nature's teachings. While from all around earth and her waters and the depths of air comes a still voice. Ruthie's tree. I hope this doesn't freak you out, but this is what Bryan says. Ruthie's tree is talking to you right now. It's whispering to you. Hey, tss. Look at the lines. Yet a few days. And you, thee. Look at the top of 263. The all-beholding sun shall see no more. Ruthie's tree is going, hey, tss. Let me tell you, you don't get to stay here forever. You can't stay at the park forever. But I like to swing in the park. Sorry, you got to go bye-bye. All of us have to leave the park. The oak. Look how he says this. This is a really strange picture. That's why I like Ruthie's tree out there. The oak shall send, do you see it? Line 30. The oak shall send his roots abroad and pierce thy mold. Your face will someday have roots growing right through it. As a tree grows over where you used to be buried. Jeez! This is kind of a heavy poem. The first 30 lines sets up the thesis. You got to go bye-bye. The major difference between you and a fly is you know about fly swatters. Flies don't know about fly swatters. They just fly around and they're gone. You, on the other hand, are aware. There's this thing called a fly swatter. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. It's coming. Well, that kind of freaks me out. Part 2. Yet, not to thine eternal resting place shalt thou retire alone, nor couldst thou wish couch more magnificent. So right away he's going to break in the poem. He's going to say part 2. Hey, 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 don't worry. You're not alone. Everybody has to leave the park. Everybody has got to go to the narrow house. Everybody has got to go take a nap. Now this couch more magnificent is an important word picture, so we want to write it down. Bryan is going to say dying is like going and taking a nice long nap, which for most of us is something we'd like to do. Some of us say I'd like to do it now. The only difference is obviously you wake up, right, when you take a normal nap. Now, if you have certain kinds of theological views or eschatological views, after you die, maybe there's this possibility, right, of an afterlife or whatever. Interestingly, notice Bryan doesn't get into the notion of afterlife. He treats the idea of death very this worldly, very concretely. And he says, don't worry, lots and lots of people have come before. Look at the next line. Thou shalt lie down with patriarchs of the infant world, with kings, the powerful of the earth, the wise, the good. Everybody goes. All the people, the billions and billions of people who have all lived on this planet, Where are they? Point to them. You know they existed. William Cullen Bryan is a classic example. Dude, you're reading lines written by a guy who is not around anymore. He's gone. Where is he gone? Same place you're going to go. Same place the people you love are going to go. Everybody's got to go. There's no reason to fear going away from the park. Everybody has to go. Notice he says, all that tread the globe. I'm at line 48, 49. All that tread the globe are but a handful to the tribes that slumber in its bosom. The number of people alive on this planet right now is like 1 compared to 10 million in ratio of the people who are laying under the ground, who've died. Everybody has to leave the park. Millions in their solitude, line 55, right? The dead reign there alone. Top of page 264. So thou shalt rest. In other words, he says, hey, same thing that happened to all those people has to happen to you. Same thing that happened to all those people has to happen to your mom, your dad, your grandma, your grandpa, the people who you love. Everybody has got to go. He says, but what if you go all alone and no one takes notice of you? You die completely alone. What about that? He says, all that breathe will share thy destiny. Everybody's got to go. Take some comfort in the fact you're not alone. Death is never alone. Because everybody else has got to go there too. He sees then death, like life, as a journey.